my spooky friends. I'm your host, John, of Dairyland Frights, the paranormal podcast that covers everything spooky, creepy, and mysterious in the Midwest. But today, we're going to go farther. We're going to go across the pond, as they say. I'm old school, Chris. And I want to introduce you to Chris from Strange States Podcast. Hey, Chris, how are you? Nice to have you
Hello.
here.
Hello, mate. Nice to see you.
So I've had people in the past. Chris and I were talking a little bit offline here. We had Kev. We need to talk about ghosts. I've had the ghost story guys on, and I love the UK because you guys have a whole different perspective on spirits and ghosts. Some of your, like, even your furniture in your country is older than the America.
yeah, that's true.
You have buildings, furniture, books, on and on, that we're just little puppies, you know. We're just little, children compared to you guys. So what I want to start out with is tell me a little bit about, yourself and your podcast, Strange States.
So, to make it really clear, it's not really a podcast that I do, although I have done one before. It's more Instagram and then moving towards YouTube. So I've always been interested from being a little kid in weird stuff. You know, it just makes my imagination go wild. So I've always been interested in ghosts, UFOs, all that kind of stuff. And during lockdown in the UK, when all the COVID things was happening, we couldn't do a lot. We couldn't do a lot while we were in lockdown. So I decided to start a Instagram account, which is Strange States, and just put down some experiences, some of the things I found interesting. And before I knew it, there were thousands of people following me. It was really good. And I was posting every day, and it was becoming less of a hobby and more of a, how can I put it? A duty to put that kind of stuff on, because I think it entertained people and it took people's minds off some of the not so good stuff that was going on during COVID, and and it entertained me as well. So I've been on ghost hunts. I've had some very strange experiences, and maybe I can get into some of the things that I've experienced myself with you.
Yeah, so that was one of my questions. And it's funny. I always say podcast because I'm so used to people being on a podcast or whatever. But yes, to clarify things, he doesn't have a podcast. He just goes on Instagram. And the great thing about the stuff, before we get to your experiences, please check it out on Instagram, because I think, Chris, you bring things to life that normally people, I don't know, don't see or don't think about, because usually when you think of ghosts, you think of the big ones, right? Yeah. You think of the big stories, the Enfield poltergeist, for example.
Absolutely,
That's the big one. Also, one thing I talked about was a show in the UK called Ghostwatch in the 80s that I talked to, which I want to know. We'll get to that here, but I just love it because you do a really great job with that. And like I said, I followed you because I said, wow, Chris is really interesting, and I wanted to get on the podcast. So one of the things is, let's share some of your paranormal experiences with my spooky friends.
You mentioned the Enfield haunting, and that's quite a prevalent one in the UK. Everyone knows it. But that's not the worst one, if I can be so bold as to say that.
Yes.
The worst one is the one in Pontefract in Yorkshire. For me, I started off this as a complete skeptic. Didn't really believe in spirits and ghosts, but I was always interested in the people that did. And there is somewhere called 30 East Drive, which is a street in the UK, and it's in Pontefract, which is in West Yorkshire. Now, this is a very normal street. It's I can't tell you how normal the street is. There's nothing special about the street, but the actual area's got some history about it. And there is a house there called 30 East Drive, and I went with a friend on one of these ghost hunts. We paid quite a bit of money to go, I think it was quite a bit of money anyway. And I didn't expect to see anything. I didn't expect to hear anything, or it was just a night out, really. And I came away from there shocked and questioning everything that I'd ever thought was rational and normal and scientific. And I couldn't get my head around it for about 3 or 4 weeks until it dissipated, I suppose. I can start from the beginning maybe and tell you a little bit about it. So,
absolutely.
So my friend, me and Hannah, my friend, she set it up, and we got the tickets. We drove there, and it's the little ghost hunt started from 9 o'clock at night, and it was supposed to finish at 6 in the morning. So you had quite a long time there. And what they would do, the company that set it up, they would allow a certain amount of people into the house at night, and you could do table tipping, you could do maybe a Ouija board if you wanted to. There was someone there that could speak to you about the history of the place. So maybe I should give you the history of the place.
Yes, please.
There was a family there called the Pritchards who were a normal family, and they had experiences there of a ghost, an entity, a spirit that was very violent and very connected to the eldest girl who lived in the family, to the point where supposedly the entity tried to kill the girl, up in a cord around her neck and trying to kill her. Now, when you hear that, you think, that's a very rare occurrence. You don't really hear that much where spirits are trying to hurt people. But I thought to myself, we've got to check this out. So we went there, and the organiser told us about the place. And then we split up into little teams. So there's a few other people there as well, probably about 4 or 5 other people. And we split up. And I said to the organiser, look, I'm a real skeptic. And this was before Strange States, before I did any of that. Would I be able to go around the house on my own at some point? And the guy said, yes, absolutely, you can do that. So we did a little bit of table tipping, a little bit of sitting around the house. It wasn't a big house. It was an average size UK council house.
Sure.
I didn't really feel anything weird. I didn't see anything strange. No one else really picked up on anything. But there were 4 television monitors in the kitchen that they'd set up and that you put cameras everywhere. So I said to the guy around about 12 o'clock at night, I said, would I be able to go upstairs on my own for an hour? Everyone else stayed downstairs and me go upstairs for an hour. And no one really wanted to go upstairs on their own. Even though nothing had happened, you still have that feeling of, probably some people have that trepidation where they don't want to be on their own in that kind of environment. But I'm not bothered. So I went upstairs. And upstairs, I must say the house was still set in the 70s. They had made the house look like it was still in the era of when all this happened. There were pictures of Donny Osmond on the kids' bedroom walls. There was Rubik's Cubes around. All that good stuff.
Yeah, they get that.
So I thought, what I'll do, I'm going to sit in the dark in the girls' bedroom, where the girls' bedroom was supposed to be. And there was a bed there. So I sat on the bed, and in front of me is the door to the bedroom. And beyond that is I can see into the bathroom. And to the left of me is Mum and Dad's room, which would have been Mum and Dad's room. And then just down the hallway is the little boy's room. So I'm in the eldest girl's bedroom now. I'm sat with my back against the wall, and the bed is pushed up against the wall. And I'm just sitting there, and I'm on Facebook at the time, just telling people where I am, my friends and stuff, and saying, I'm at this ghost hunt. Thinking nothing of it. I'm not hearing anything weird. I'm not seeing anything weird. Then, so I'm leaning against the wall, and behind me, it's the outside wall to the front of the house. And I can hear scraping down the wall, and it sounded like someone had got a garden rake and was just pulling it down the wall. And I mean loud. It wasn't subtle. It was very loud. So I moved and thought, what was that? Could it have been pipes? Maybe pipes for the water? Something moving around, maybe? Could it be a mouse in the walls? Could it be something? I'm trying to figure it out. So I didn't think anything of it. I leaned back again. As soon as I put my head against the wall, this huge scraping. And as I moved, it stopped. And I thought, that's very strange, but I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to say it's something weird when I don't know.
Right.
And then as I lean back again on the bed and my back is against the wall, the door that's in front of me just starts moving like this on its own. I'm not touching it. There's no windows open. There's no way anything can move that door, but it's moving slightly on its own, just moving slightly. So I touch the door and I stop it from moving, and I put something. I think it was a small toy to jar the door so it wouldn't move. I lean back again. The door does exactly the same thing. It moves the toy and it starts to move. Now I'm thinking, okay, that's not right. That's not logical.
Yeah.
So I'm looking around the room and I'm thinking to myself, the guy downstairs who set this up, has he got some kind of, I know this sounds strange, but has he got some kind of mechanical thing that is moving maybe in the house that he's set up? I know that sounds, out there, but that's my rational brain trying to figure it out. And I thought, no, there's no way you can do this. Looking around the room. And then I think to myself, okay, so I'll go out of the room and I lean over the banister to the downstairs where the stairs are, and I shout downstairs, is anyone moving downstairs? Is anyone making any loud noises, any scraping? And I hear my friend Hannah, and she said, no, everyone's watching you on the monitors because there's a camera in there. So I say, okay, fair enough. So I go back in the room and I don't feel scared. I don't feel like there's a bad presence around me or anything like that. So I sit back down and then I hear from under the bed, knocking from under the bed. So I'm sat there thinking, okay, what's that now? So I lean forward where my legs are dangling off the bed, and between my legs, a ball, a green ball, which naughty of me, but I took it from that house when we left. The ball, like a little bouncy ball, a child's ball, rolled out from underneath the bed. And I'm looking at it. As I'm looking at the floor, it rolls out right in front of me, and it just starts doing this on its own.
Spinning, huh?
On its own. I'm not touching it. There's no one else touching it. There's no magnets. There's no... And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? What is going on? And now I'm thinking, the guy downstairs has got to be doing something.
Right, exactly.
He's got to have a gyro or something in the ball that's making it move. There's got to be. So I'll pick the ball up. It's a small ball, only about so big. And I'm checking the ball out. I'm trying to twist it. It's a rubber ball. There's nothing. It's a ball. I bounce the ball. I put it back on the floor. And as soon as I put it back on the floor and let go, it rolls itself back under the bed.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
Now, as in all stories about seeing things and stuff, on the camera, it didn't see the ball rolling. It only saw me pick it up and me going, what the hell is this? It didn't see it, just didn't catch. So,
holy shit.
I was really frustrated. So I got the ball from under the bed. I put my arm under the bed. I got the ball from under the bed. And I went back downstairs. And when I walked into the kitchen where everyone was who was watching the monitors, all their jaws were on the floor. And they were looking at me as soon as I walked in and said, you didn't see what we saw. So on the monitors, there were, Hannah said, my friend, she said, there was about 30 or 40 orbs. You've heard of orbs?
Yes.
There were about 30 or 40 just buzzing around you all the time while you were there. Yeah. These things were just moving, a little bit like flames from a candle, all around you. Oh. And as soon as you started moving, they disappeared. When you were still, they just like flies, really. And there was nothing around it. It wasn't dust. It wasn't.
Yeah.
And I couldn't explain it.
There
was nothing there. There's nothing there.
Oh.
So I asked the guy, I said, look, away from the customers, be honest, was there anything up there that you'd set up? Because if it was fantastic. You did a great job.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Money's worth.
And I won't say anything. It was a frightening experience, which was good.
Yeah.
But he said, no, we don't set anything up. We just let you come in, you do what you want, and then we come out. So that experience for me, I didn't see a ghost there. I didn't see any spirit there. But that experience for me, when things are moving like they shouldn't do, when things are moving without the realms of physics behind it or any kind of logic behind it, that for me is paranormal.
Yeah. Wow. Boy, I have a ton of questions.
Okay,
Did anyone do you know die in that house? Did the guy, when he was like talking to you, said, "Hey, I want to let you know a couple of people died in this house," and or anything like that?
So as I know it, I mean, other people might know a little bit more about this, but as I understand it, there was a guy there called Fred who died. He was an old man, and apparently he wasn't a nice man either. I don't know the history behind the guy. I think he died in the 40s or 50s. This family were there in the 80s. But the daughter, she said there was someone there called Fred. But the history of the place goes back a lot further. So apparently it was the site of a hanging tree in the UK.
Oh boy, yeah.
So across the road from the house, there is a tree that is the hanging tree, and they used to execute people there. I'm talking centuries ago, and there was supposed to be a black monk who was there, who was executed for killing children, and that was maybe a connection to it. I mean, that's very easy to come up with something like that and say this is the cause of this. Anyone can say, you know.
Yeah, anybody can say that, right?
It gives a little bit of an insight into maybe why that was. But my friend, she didn't feel anything or see anything apart from the orbs that were around me. But we didn't stay the night. I wouldn't stay.
I don't blame you.
We left at 2:00 in the morning because I just didn't feel comfortable there. And I'm not the kind of person that's scared easily. And I wasn't scared. I was just really uncomfortable. I felt like it was a place where we shouldn't have been. And I've never felt like that in my life anywhere. Yeah. It was very strange.
Yeah, so that's what my next question is, you answered is like, you felt like there's something wrong here, right? Yeah. Like there's a dark presence. It just, did you get like any physically sick? Did you feel you had a headache? Did you vomit, or did you have an upset stomach? Anything like that?
I didn't feel any physical symptoms of being in the house. Only emotionally, I suppose. And my missus, my girlfriend, my wife, I should say, girlfriend, my wife, she can attest to the fact that I'm not a very emotional person, really. And I felt quite emotional there. And I felt quite, what's the word? Not welcome. Not welcome.
Right.
You sometimes have that feeling in places where you shouldn't be. But when I spoke to someone else about this, I spoke to someone who's really into spirit and mediumship as well. They said, because my presence is, I'm a bit of a man's man, if you know what I mean.
Gotcha.
And they said maybe your presence there was a little bit intrusive to the spirit that was there. They felt like they weren't in control if you're there. They wanted you out, if you know what I mean, maybe. And there might be some credence to that.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me, talking to a medium I had on the show, she said there was this older man who had lived in this apartment, or a flats, as you would call it. And he had lived there for like 30 years, right? Well, he died in that apartment. A young woman moved in, and she was like repainting everything. She was like doing everything. And every time she would do something, like something would happen. Like she would be, her paint can, she'd be painting, and the paint can would tip over. Or like she'd feel sick. Or she would move stuff like the furniture, and the furniture would move back the next day. And so she came back and she's like, what is going on? She tried everything, to like call the landlord. Hey, I think someone's in my apartment messing with me. There's something's going on. So eventually she said, there's something paranormal going on. I don't know what's going on. And she hired this medium who came in there, and as soon as the medium walked in, said, speaking of Fred, Fred, he's a ghost. He lived here. He doesn't like you touching his stuff. Do not touch his stuff. And she's like, what? And so she had to like tell Fred, if you're going to stay here, you can't touch her stuff. Okay. You need to relax and be calm and let this young lady, I can't remember her name, Ruth or whatever, make sure she, And then, it was just really weird. He was terrorizing the other women too, not to a point of like hurting them, biting them, scratching them, bruising them. He was just like, nope, this is my place. I want it here. You know what I mean? Like us guys are like, when the wife comes in and grabs something, you're like, honey, what are you doing with it? I'm not done with that yet. Put it back. Same kind of thing. But this was not evil. This was just, this is my place. I've lived here. I'm still living here. And you see that a lot, similar to that. But I'm sure, when you came in being, like you said, a man's man, you're a brave, strong guy. You come in there and you put that presence out there, right? And that aura, or whatever you want to say, that ghost is probably going, yeah, all right, well, take this man's man.
Yeah, that's probably true. I mean, the people that were there that night, they were just ordinary people, just people who are interested in ghosts, people who probably watch Most Haunted quite a bit. I was very, very skeptical walking in. I didn't expect to see anything at all. And I came out very uncomfortable. Yeah, really weird, very strange.
Do you think anything came home with you? Do you think you brought anything home with you, Chris?
Well, I brought the ball home. I took the ball home.
Right, the ball home. But I'm talking like a spirit.
I'm going to take this. This is my reward for going through that. So, I brought the little bouncy ball home, and it's never done anything. It's sitting in a cupboard downstairs.
Oh, okay. All right.
So no, I don't think I brought anything home at all. No,
that's good. Though that's good news. And you talked about, too, some other paranormal experience. Did you ever have one when you were younger? Did you ever have something where you went, now you look at it and go, was that something or maybe not? I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, when I look back now, I'm 42 now. So when I was younger, I think I had an out-of-body experience when I was about 4 or 5. I think looking back now, if I understand it correctly, as we understand out-of-body experiences, I think I did. When I was 4 or 5, I was on my bed and I was flicking a shirt button up and down and I was catching it in my mouth, and I flipped it up and I caught it in my mouth and I swallowed it, and I was choking, and I went from choking to seeing myself from the ceiling choking, and then I went back to coughing it up. I move quickly. Now you forget about that when you're a child, you grow up, you forget about that, and when you look back on it now, I think that's probably as close to an accurate out-of-body experience as I could get. And then I do remember, again, being very young and hearing, and I don't want to sound like an absolute kook or someone who thinks that they're psychic, because I don't. But I do remember hearing voices. I remember hearing adult voices when I was only there. And it wasn't like a child might imagine hearing voices and like an imaginary friend. It wasn't that. They were saying little words and then gone. It might have, there might have been a woman that said, "How are you?" And, there's no one there. But as you're a kid, you don't realise this. And I can't say that it was a spirit thing. Maybe it was my childish brain doing things. I don't know. But I do remember looking back now thinking that might have been something that.
Yeah. That's amazing, too, because a lot of people I talk to who've had childhood experiences, like one, and I can't believe that this one woman said when she was 4 or 5, she saw this man pass through the door. Like this older man pass through a door and then go through the other wall. And she was like, with that too, her father bought a rocking chair for her room because her mom likes to rock her to sleep, and read her a story. And they found this rocking chair somewhere. And she found out later when she was like 17, they told her all this stuff. The house is haunted. They didn't want to tell her when she's 5 years old. Oh, by the way. But anyway, so they bought her this rocking chair and everything. And then one day, she's 5 years old. She looks over and she sees this older man in the rocking chair rocking. And she's like, okay, well, that's, your 5-year-old brain. Maybe that's dad. Maybe, you don't know, right? You're just kind of thinking about it. But she said the next day, the rocking chair was out of her room on the corner for the trash bin. Her dad just And her dad didn't tell her. Her dad didn't say, honey. And then later her dad said, yeah, as soon as you told me that, honey, I went like, nope. Out you go, rocking chair. See ya. And she's a paranormal investigator now because she said it just led her to like, I want to know why there was a man in my room. Why was that chair rocking? Why was all this stuff happening? So she became a paranormal investigator with her husband, and they love it. They go and they've had some crazy stuff happen to them that they can't explain. And I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's the mystery. Even if you're a skeptic like I am, and I've loved ghosts as long as I can remember, it's just finding out what's out there, right? What's the meaning of this, right? Do you kind of agree with that?
The two biggest questions that humanity has is, one, are we alone in the universe? And two, what happens when we die? Those are the two main questions that would change everything about the way we live.
Yeah.
If we're alone in the universe, it's a pretty poor universe, I think. If we just die, again, it's a pretty poor universe. Yeah. So I'm like you, I'm quite skeptical. I'm quite, I question everything. And then even if I get the answer, I question the answer. It's the only way it can be. I think that's the way science works things out. And I think that's the only critical way it can be with the paranormal. I do have a slight issue with people that say that they are psychic mediums. I've got a slight issue with that because I've never met one that makes real sense, and I've met a few, and I've seen a few good ones as well. But that has always struck a little bit of a chord in me that I don't think there is that side of the spiritual realm, the ghost realm. I struggle to see if that exists. I do. Yeah. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, and let's be honest, Chris. Life is so random, right? Yes. Just getting up in the morning. Maybe you don't wake up. I don't want to be morbid, but maybe you have a heart attack and you don't wake up. Okay, or like maybe you get out of bed and you stub your toe or you twist your ankle or something. Okay, well, you didn't plan on doing that, or you get in your car, you start your car, it won't start. And you're like, none of these things you're planning, right? They just happen. Or you meet somebody you haven't seen in like 20 years, just randomly at the pub or wherever. And you're like, what? And so when I talk to mediums, the mediums I have on, I'll say, look, take it with a grain of salt. Because the two questions they get asked the most is relationships and financial, right? Yeah. And like, and she goes, I always tell people, look, just because I tell you you're going to inherit money soon, you might inherit $10 or $10 or £5 or what, right? It's not life changing. It's just enough to go and go to the, like I said, go to the pub or wherever and have a pint. I mean, whatever, right? In your language, like it doesn't mean anything. So they always say to me, because they're like, when I do a tarot reading, I'm like, if you get a bad one, it's not that you're going to have bad luck. It's maybe you have a bad day or you have a bad conversation. Well, that can happen anytime, right? You can get into a fight with your wife or your whoever, your friend or whatever. I mean, that just happens. So, I think that's interesting. And, keeping skeptical is a huge thing because with the paranormal, it's coming to the forefront, right? If we look in the UK and we look in the States, I think it's like 45% of people believe in the paranormal or something, when like maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago or 50 years ago, it might be like 10%, 5%, right? Yeah. And there's just too many things that are happening. I just find that really interesting. I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that before we move on.
I find that the people who I speak to, I've been running Strange States now by myself for about 3 years and with my friend Paul, because he helps me with the filming and stuff that we do. For about 4 years now, it's been going-ish. And the people that I speak to are really rational. They're really rational people. They're not kooks. They're not people who are just trying to, excuse me, drum up some attention for themselves. They're really good, honest people, I believe. I've spoken to a lot of people about UFOs. I've spoken to people about things they've seen, experiences they've been through. And the one thing they all have in common is they believe it. They believe that they've had these experiences, that they have had these encounters maybe. And who am I to say you're lying or, you've got it wrong? I mean, the experience I had at that 30 East Drive with the scratching on the walls, to anyone else listening, that just sounds bizarre and made up. But I can only tell you how it felt to me. So it's a strange one.
Yeah, it definitely is. You got to take everything, like I said, it's not truth. You got to be like, okay, that's interesting. Let me investigate that. And moving to that, one of the things that was the biggest thing that I love, like I said, I talked to Kev from We Need to Talk About Ghost and the Ghost Story guys about Ghost Watch. That was the biggest. And when they told me about it, like Kev was saying he was like 13 years old and he didn't see the disclaimer. So I did a couple episodes on it. So basically what it was, I don't know if you're familiar with War of the Worlds. It was done in the 30s by Orson Welles. He got on the radio and he said, we're being attacked by aliens, and people believed it. Like people went out with shotguns and started shooting water towers because they thought these aliens are coming down. And this is kind of very similar. Now, Orson Welles come on the radio. This is the 1930s. Came on the radio and said, okay, everybody calm down. This is just for fun. In Ghost Watch, if I remember right, is they didn't say that. They just kept going with the story, similar to the Enfield Poltergeist. Do you want to kind of add some comments to that? Because I love this.
So Ghost Watch it's a phenomena in the UK for the people who watched it live and for the people who now watch it on YouTube and stuff. So Ghost Watch was a BBC-made program that had credibility because of the guy who was hosting it, called Michael Parkinson. And he was a very credible journalist. He's very well known in the UK. He's interviewed Muhammad Ali, all the movie stars you can think of. So if his name is attached to something, it's true and it's real and it's honest. There were also the presenters, Sarah Green, very well-known presenter in the UK at the time. Craig Charles, a very known personality at the time. And her husband, Mike Green, was in the studio with Michael Parkinson. And what made that program unique was there was no disclaimer. I don't remember a disclaimer, and I don't remember seeing a disclaimer at the start or at the end. It was sold as, this is happening and this is true. And I was about 13, maybe I was about 12 or 13 at the time watching it, and I couldn't quite believe what I was seeing. And for those who haven't seen it, I don't want to give you any spoilers, but it's the villain of the piece is one of the scariest entities that you will ever see. Forget Freddy Krueger, forget Michael Myers. Pipes, the guy who's in it as the entity, is one of the most scary beings that you're ever going to clap eyes on. Yeah. And it's not what you saw of him, it's what you didn't see. It was a very cleverly made and shot piece of television. It was very, very good. And I think it had the record number of complaints in a week.
Over 30,000.
Yeah. Yeah. People were complaining to the BBC that their clocks had stopped while watching it, that things were flying off the walls. The TV had fallen off the mantelpiece or whatever. All sorts of really weird stuff. Yeah, I enjoyed it immensely.
Yeah. And again, today, it's really hard this was done in what? Mid-80s, I believe, something like that. Yes. 85, something like that. Yeah.
And when the 80s,
when I watched it, I watched it a year ago, okay? And, there's been a lot of hoax and shows and whatever. Blair Witch Project, I don't know if you're familiar with. That was a huge one where, you're right, people actually went to the town to look for these kids. And like the town people had to tell, no, it's a fake. No, stop. People are legitimately concerned that, it was crazy. Anyway, and when I watched this, I said, this is genius. This is absolutely genius, especially when I talk to people from the UK like yourself, Chris. Yeah. And they said, it's the top people. This isn't like they got some guy off the street and said, here's an actor, and just, hey, roll with it. These are like household names. These are people that you would eat dinner in front of the TV and they'd be talking to Muhammad Ali or talking to, whoever, right? A huge famous star. You're like, wow, wait a minute. This must be true if this guy's doing it and this woman's doing it. And I love that. I didn't know that. And then when I was explained that, I'm like, oh, and then I started reading articles about it. I was just blown away. That's genius.
I think it was the precursor to films like The Blair Witch and to the found footage stuff. Very ahead of its time. I mean, when you look at it now, you can sort of see that it was obviously set up and the way it works. Yeah, but as a kid in the 80s where, you've never seen anything like that before, it really did. You honestly thought, holy shit, this is happening. It was really well made. I thought it was a genius program.
Yeah, and you felt sorry for those people too. You're like, you get involved. You're like, oh my, get those people out of there. The Pipes is gonna, God knows what he's gonna do. And, you're getting really frantic and stuff as a kid. You're looking around. I know Kev said he was watching it. And he said he's 13, around your age, and he at the time, and he was watching it, and he was all alone, and he heard like footsteps, upstairs, and he's like, freaking out. And he goes, man, was I scared, John? I was so. And then my parents got home, and they were like, you all right? What's going on? And then I don't know. Did they ever re-air that in the UK? I don't think they did.
No. So. As far as I know, they banned it. They banned it for about maybe 10 years because it had that much of an effect on the people that were watching, and it's never been back on the BBC. As far as I'm aware, it's on YouTube. The full thing is on YouTube. I think you maybe get it on BBC iPlayer as well, maybe. But I think to do something like that nowadays would be very difficult because everyone is so skeptical. With, that's CGI, that's an actor, we're all very clued up because we've got smartphones and we've got access to up-to-date first-hand information in seconds on your phone. So it makes things very difficult to make up. I mean, I don't want to go off topic there, but me and my friend are investigating something at the minute, which is really, really, really strange. And we've done some work on it. Maybe you've seen it on Strange States, but it's something that's really interesting. And I don't know how much I can tell you about it, to be fair.
All right.
Yeah. Maybe I'll think about how I present that to you, because it's not to do with ghosts. It's not to do with... it's a very strange set of circumstances.
Well, I would love to get the exclusive. So you think about that while we move on to our topic, Chris, and then we can share that with my audience so I can, get a little tease in there. So our topic today, I want to have a little fun today with Chris. Europe is well known for its ghosts, cryptids, and legends. And I wanted to see how America stacks up and discuss. Now, this is my research, Chris. I didn't ask Chris about this at all. So he's going to either go, John, that's not even close. You're way off. Or he might be like, yeah, I kind of agree with that. And I've done, on the American side, I've done all the different episodes on these. So I've done tons of research to them. And they're like, wow, okay. So let's get right into it. So I'm going to start with the UK first. And this is the granddaddy of all, the Tower of London, right? Okay. Would you agree that's the number one? Or is there something else you go like, yeah, Tower of London's good, John, but there's something else that I think is a little more spookier or more paranormal?
The UK is a big place. I mean, people People don't really realise how big the UK actually is. I think we're just a little island off the coast of France. We're not. We're quite a big place. The Tower of London has lots and lots of history behind it.
Right.
As a place, I'm sure there was lots of things that were there that weren't nice, beheadings and such like. But in terms of being one of the most maybe paranormal places in the UK, I think there's a ton more. I think there's probably a hell of a lot more. I know that the York vaults up in York are very haunted, or supposedly. So yeah, I mean, as an interesting place, fantastic, but I don't think it's one of the most haunted places.
Yeah, that's really interesting to me. A lot of people too say the Borley Rectory is that's up there. Would you agree with that?
That is. Yeah, absolutely. I think most haunted have been there a couple of times, and what I've heard about that place, and I've seen a couple of things as well online, that's supposed to be very, very alive and active with spirits and stuff. Anywhere that you have, I think, 21st century things going on, any small villages in the UK, they have their own history and they have their own, how can I put it? They have their own ways of seeing and doing things. And you'll find that some of the most haunted places aren't talked about. They're just not. They're put to one side and left.
Yeah. Does one come to mind? Does one come to your mind that you're like, that's one I've heard of.
So, what do you mean, like one of the most well-known, or one that's not been well-known?
Just not well-known.
Not well-known. Yes. So where I'm from, it's an area. It's not really a building. It's an area. And I suppose it is well-known, but not to the point where probably your listeners would know about it. It's called Cannock Chase. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No. So
Cannock Chase is an area from my hometown, and it's an area of like woodland, and it's so like Cannock Chase is a little bit like Skinwalker Ranch. Have you heard of that?
Yes.
It's like the UK version of Skinwalker Ranch, but it's not hugely well known. But that place is probably one of the most active of all sorts of phenomena, not just like spirits and stuff. Okay, yeah. So Cannock Chase as a place, it's a very large area of like wildland, and it's got woods and all sorts of different phenomena that is attached to it. So that's probably a place where if people researched it, they'd be amazed, but it seldom gets a lot of coverage. So yeah, there's that place, yeah.
Really? Because that's really interesting to me, because I really love the different places that you don't hear about, right?
Yeah.
Like Borley Rectory or Tower of London and everything like that. I think one of the biggest things, too, is to remember here in the States, so we'll switch over to the States here, and one of the biggest ones for us is the Eastern State Penitentiary. I don't know if you've heard about this. This is in Pennsylvania. And it was built in 1829 with castle-like walls and imposing guard towers. And it's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and was the first prison to institute solitary confinement. Prisoners lived alone, ate alone, and even exercised alone. And they would sometimes put these people in solitary confinement with like a hood over them, so they would just be solitary, just no people to talk to, no people to I don't know, play sports with, or whatever the heck you do at that time. It was famous because it housed Al Capone. You've heard of Al Capone, I bet you.
Yeah.
And then also Willie Sutton. They were both big-time bank robbers. And with a prison, as you know, there's already this crazy, suffering and violence, and you name it, right? And then you add solitary confinement, and they're all alone. There's going to be ghosts there. So in America, all the people who have visited always have an experience of something, whether they're grabbed, touched, voice. And my paranormal investigator friends have said, yeah, I've gone in there, I've gotten EVPs, women. I feel sorry for the women investigators because they get their hair pulled. They get like, somebody said, I bitch. She got on her EVP, which just totally, she didn't hear it. But then when they played back the EVP, she was listening to it and it said, die bitch. Clear as day. Like someone was right next to her. And she was like shaken up. I don't blame her. And it was just really, really crazy about that. And so that was one of them. Then the other one I'm just going to read before we get back into UK is really quickly. There's this one, which is one of my favorites I did a story on, called the Lemp Mansion. And this was done by guys who they were the Lemp Beer Brewery. So they were like one of the biggest brewers in America in the early 1900s. And unfortunately, this house, well, people died in this house and committed suicide. There were supposedly tunnels underneath the home where Mr. Lemp or one of the Lemps would have, how do you say, an affair with prostitutes. Okay. And there was a story where they had this kid that was born from one of his affairs that, and I'm sure you have this in the UK, where the kid was deformed, so they kept the kid in the attic and they kept him like basically chained in the attic, and whether believe it or not is totally up to you. But it was, just horrible stories. And last but not least, he murdered a prostitute who was going to go forward. Mr. Lemp or one of the Lemps go forward and say, hey, he's been fooling around and stuff. This guy is not who you think he is. So, you know what I mean? There's just all this crazy stuff in that mansion in St. Louis, Missouri, that if you go into it, you always have an experience. You always feel something, especially in certain rooms where you're saying with that one house where you felt dread, right? Where you felt like there's something going on. In one of the rooms where one of the Lemp family committed suicide, people go in there and some people start crying. Some people just like, no, they run out of the room. I can't take it. Some people get physically sick. And it's just, right? It's just, you hear that a lot with places like that.
I think maybe the issue is there. And again, I'm like you, skeptic. But if I was talking in the terms of like energy, anything that's been a trauma, something traumatic, and if there is such a thing as energy when you die, it's got to go somewhere. It can't just, I don't think it will just evaporate. It has to attach itself to something. So yeah, probably places like prisons, places where death has occurred, maybe misery, a lot of misery. That's quite prevalent. And I know you said before, I think before we started the podcast, you said that the UK has more history of stuff like spirits and hauntings. Yeah. But I think America has its own version of that with Native Americans as well. And the way they approach spirits and energy, I think, I think maybe that's not touched on enough in America.
No. There are two places. I live in Wisconsin, so up north there are Native American burial grounds everywhere. So like literally you are stepping on bones, gravestones, whatever. You do not know you're doing it. And in fact, a friend of mine who was going there camping one day, he was doing a paranormal investigation at it's called the Summerwind Mansion. It was extremely haunted here in Wisconsin, in upper Wisconsin. And they found out he was sleeping on, a native burial ground because he was sitting there sleeping with his tent, didn't realize it. And then people were like, where did you put your tent again? And he's like, well, right over there. He goes, that's a Native American burial ground. He goes, he said he had crazy dreams and he's literally sleeping on bones of the dead. And I'm like, okay.
Crazy that.
Yeah, isn't it? And it's everywhere. There are literally places in Michigan where you're walking on bones of Native Americans and American, citizens coming from the UK, who died there because of whatever reason. You know, you name it, disease, famine, whatever. It's just it just blows me away that it's just one big burial ground and you don't even know it. So I'm like,
absolutely,
that's crazy. So you got to help me with this pronunciation. It's called the Skidrid Inn in Wales. Skirr. Yeah. So I was reading about this. It was very interesting. I'm guessing a lot of pubs and inns in the UK are haunted. This one struck me as because they said they've seen numerous ghosts, been touched, and all this stuff like that. Do you have maybe a pub or an inn that people don't know about? That isn't as haunted as maybe something like this.
There is a pub. So the Skirrid Inn is a very active place. I know Most Haunted have been there a couple of times.
Nice.
But there is one called the Three Acres, which is in, I believe, Wakefield in West Yorkshire. And that is said to have been a very, very active place. And also the Queen's Head in Sheffield, which is probably one of probably the oldest building of that type in Sheffield, of its type. It's now a pub. And me and my friend did an investigation there. And again, we had a chair move on its own right in front of us, which it blows my mind because I'm always trying to think, did one of us knock it? Did one of us, was it on a slant maybe? Was it connected to something that's moved? And you're trying to rationalise it and you can't. But apparently that place was very, very haunted. And we did hear and see a couple of little things that maybe couldn't be rationalised in terms of, we can give a definite, it's this. But there's a lot of pubs in the UK and a lot of pubs that are in buildings that are old, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's really interesting to me because, again, here in America, too, we have our little pubs thing. And I'm just using here one that is close to me in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, is just a city about 2 hours away from me. And it's called the Shakers Cigar Bar, where basically you can go in and it's one of the few places, I don't know in the UK, but in America, you are no longer able to smoke in a bar.
That's true.
That has been outlawed, and so you can't do that anymore. You can go in a corner and outside and do it, but here, they actually got a special license. You can do that. So if you don't like cigar smoke, I don't recommend going into this place.
Yeah.
You're probably not going to like it and get sick. But in here, a lot of gangsters in the 20s hung out. There's secret rooms for prohibition, which was, telling people they couldn't drink anymore. Yeah, that didn't last very long. And there's all these people where they've seen floating glasses. They've seen apparitions. They've seen, going down in the secret rooms, which are now like storage rooms. They have felt, heard screams. They've just every little thing you can think about. And they've done numerous paranormal investigations too. And they have really, really have gotten some crazy stuff, especially to do with touching and voices. That they were like, they've heard, like one of my paranormal friends got on an EVP saying murder, clear as day. Someone saying that it seems like they were talking right into the mic, excuse me. And I was just like, that's amazing. Cause these places are typically for the most part a fun place, right? Typically you go in, you meet your buddies and you're hanging out, you're having a pint or brew, whatever you're having. Maybe sometimes something serious is happening and you got to talk to them, but it's a place that you gather that is not considered negative, would you say?
Well, I mean, because buildings change the way they're used, people change the way they use buildings over decades and over centuries, especially in the UK. And I'm guessing in America to a certain point as well. I think anything that's negative has a real impact on a place. And, whether I think the energy in places is important as well. I think that's what I've learned over the past however many years of doing this. That's probably the case. It's probably the fact that trauma has a lasting effect on an area. People say when they go to Auschwitz, when they visit that place, and they just feel different when they're there. Everything's quiet, everything's more subdued. And I know that's probably the nature of the tour, maybe, that they're on.
Sure.
But also they say they feel like they're in 1930s Germany, 1930s occupation.
Right.
And I think that has a lasting effect. I think that kind of feeling, that foreboding feeling, and the feeling that I had in the 30 East Drive house in Pontefract, where I encountered that, I had that feeling, of course.
Yeah, that's crazy. Two really quick ones. My favorite one, I love castles, is Chillingham Castle. You know, that one they mentioned through my research, but I'm sure there's a lot of other castles that are worse in the UK. But this one they talk about, you hear screams, there's touches, there's apparitions, on and on and on. There's, I believe there's a plague pit. And if you're familiar, my spooky friends, plague pits were basically what people did was, well, I can't bury all these people and give them gravestones, so I'm just going to throw them in a pit. I'm just going to cover that over. And these poor people, nobody, good luck trying to figure out if you had a relative in that time who died from the plague. Probably not. It's going to take a lot of work and a lot of money for you to figure that out, which is shameful.
Absolutely.
So any castles that come to mind that you maybe have done research on or investigations or just something, come on top of your head?
In terms of castles, not really, no. I mean, there's plenty of castles in the UK.
Yes.
Some of them that are fully intact or mostly intact, and some of that are just ruins. There is somewhere called Nostell Priory, which is again in Yorkshire, it's ruins. A lot of spirit type entities have been seen there, but you find that the more a place is visited, the more it's talked about that supposedly it's haunted, the more you'll get people saying, yeah, I saw this and I saw that, when they didn't really. And it's really hard to differentiate between the people who are genuine and the people who are not. Yeah. But in terms of castles, I'm not familiar with that one you talked about. I know there's Bolsover Castle as well. That's quite a haunted one.
Yeah. And I love that because I'm really big into castles. I was like, man, I've always wanted to get to Europe and stay in a castle, visit a castle. It's just one of the things on my bucket list. Now, two things in the Americas where we have, it was really funny. My friend went on a Jack the Ripper tour. Come on, everybody, if you go to London, you got to go on Jack the Ripper tour. It's just, but he said they got to the end and they said, Jack the Ripper killed 5 people that we know of. He wasn't trying to laugh, but he's like, well, in America, our serial killers kill 5 by breakfast. I mean, it's like, it's just such a difference, which is insane to me, which that's a entire different podcast. But, we have some of the most evil monsters, serial killers ever. And I don't know what that is. It's something in the water. I don't know what to tell you. But it's crazy. Like in Wisconsin, we had 2 of the worst, Ed Gein and Jeffrey Dahmer. You know them. And it's just crazy, right? But anyway, one of these ones in Iowa in the Midwest is called the Villisca Axe Murder House. This one's famous. It's actually run by a family similar to, what you did with your experience. And they let you can stay overnight and stuff. But in here, what happened was the entire family was killed by a man with an axe, including a baby. So you think about the evil that it took to kill small children, a baby, and the entire family. And it's never been solved, Chris. Never. No one has come forward. No one knows anything. They have a number of suspects. It's been done to death, but it's still a good one because people to this day they go in there and always have a crazy experience. It's a little farmhouse in the middle of, just like you would have a village. Nothing special about it. You drive by it, you wouldn't think twice. It's unbelievable. And it's something that really brings chills to you, knowing that in this small town, something this horrific could happen. It's just, and like I said, it's full of just unbelievable hauntings. And then the last one, I know this isn't a castle per se, but the Congress Plaza Hotel, which if you ever get to the States and get to Chicago, I highly recommend you to stay there because this one, the 12th and, well, they don't call it the 13th floor anymore because there's been too many crazy things that have happened. But in the Congress Plaza Hotel, it's haunted like crazy. There is a room you can stay in that is the most haunted room in the hotel, and people have stayed in it, have not stayed the night. They have left, and because they've had numerous things happen to them that doesn't make them happy. And one of the rooms that they had to close down and is boarded up and is no longer a room there, because you'll go in your, normally you go in like it's 202, 203, 204. But here it's like 202, 204. And you're like, where's room 203? So in this room, this is horrible. This woman was having all these issues, not only with her family life, but with her financials and everything. And she decided that the best thing for her to do was to kill her entire family. So she threw her boys, get this, threw her little boys, 6 and 7, out the window. She was on the 12th floor. Threw them out the window. Then she jumped out the window. And I'm like, you're just like, how is this, like, you know what I mean? How is this even possible that someone could do something that's horrific? And, it was in the news. This is a real thing. It was not made up. And they found out this woman had all these issues. And people who were staying in that room before they closed it down, they were like, TV turning on, the shower turning on by itself, hearing screams, hearing children laughter, hearing, having their sheets ripped off the bed, having bruises, having whatever. And it was just believable, the experiences. And they just finally just said, and I think this is interesting that a lot of people, especially in businesses, will say, I got to keep the business going. I can't close this. It's going to cost me money. Well, they got to a certain point where they closed it down because they couldn't deal with it. I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the issue is with people that have or own or lease buildings that are haunted or they've got some kind of bad history, is you've got two choices. You can either make the most of it or try and sell it maybe or leave, essentially. But I think it's one of those things. Look at the draw.
Yeah, absolutely. So wrapping up here, Chris, tell me about, if there's anything else you want to mention about any haunted places before we wrap up.
Probably not so much haunted. I alluded to something earlier about something we were investigating, and I can give you 5 minutes of a brief synopsis of what we're doing. Yeah. So me and my friend Paul, we've been investigating a place in the UK, and it's a village that we have called Meltonstone because I don't want to give the real name of the village at all.
Sure.
For just privacy reasons for the people who live there surrounding that village. But we're investigating that at the minute, and it's the weirdest place I've ever been in my entire life.
Wow.
So it's not really a ghost thing. It's more of a people have gone missing around that area, and there's been a lot of weird, I dare to say, cult-like activity. And we're currently investigating that, and we've had some really strange experiences there. Probably too much to get into on this podcast, but on a par with maybe, I don't know whether your listeners are familiar with The Wicker Man.
Yes.
It sounds like, I need to be absolutely clear here. A lot of people have commented on my Instagram with stuff and saying, this can't be real and stuff. We're here to entertain. Of course, we put stuff on there to give a little bit of entertainment, but we also like to research the stuff that we do. At the minute, we're looking into this, and we've been looking into it for the past maybe a year, and we're still none the wiser of what's going on at this village. I know I'm being very cryptic with what I'm saying, but it's very hard to talk about it and not get into maybe a half an hour's worth of or even an hour's worth of content for you, because it's the strangest place I've ever been. And the stories that I've got from there and the people that have lived there, it's really odd. It's just really strange.
Wow. So could you do me a favor? When you guys are done with this investigation, I would love to have you back on to talk about that, if that would be okay with you.
Of course, yeah. I'll make sure I can speak to you.
I would love to hear that. Because Chris and I, we finally got together. We had some things going on, but I'm so glad that I got you on the show, Chris. You have had amazing stories, especially with that. Like I said, I want you to have you back on after you conclude your investigation.
No problem.
So tell my spooky friends, they can go on Instagram. Is there anything else you got coming up that maybe you want to share with them that they can check out?
So we've got our Instagram, which is Strange States, which has got a really good following now. It's over 20,000 people who follow us.
Yes.
And, it's really nice to have that kind of, feedback and stuff. And all the people on there are really nice. We've never had any issues with, because social media can be horrible sometimes.
Yes, it can be.
But we've got a really nice set of people who enjoy what we put out there, which is fantastic. Not really so much anything podcast wise, although we were trying to get something going with that, but it's just having the time.
Yes.
But YouTube is going to be a place where we're going to put a few little short films out, I think, regarding what we're doing at Melton Stone. Nice. And I think it's a watch this space kind of thing, I think.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show. It's been amazing. I loved everything that you talked about. One of these days, I'm going to try to convince Kev and the Ghost Story guys and yourself. Maybe we'll do some live event.
Yeah, no problem.
Or something like that, because that would be amazing to talk about that, because they have some great stories too, as well.
Yeah,
I've had some paranormal experiences that we didn't get to here on the show. But again, thank you so much, Chris. We always end every show by saying stay spooky and say hi to your ghost. So stay spooky, Chris. We will talk later. I wish you most of luck with your investigation.
Thank you for having me, John. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.